Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center, and thank you for attending the Shaw Prize Award Presentation Ceremony 2013. I am Dudu Chen, your presenter for the evening.
Good evening. I'm Leon Ko. The ceremony this year has a special meaning as it marks the 10th anniversary of the Shaw Prize.
Yes, indeed. I feel most fortunate to have taken part in this significant event over the past decade and to have observed how the outstanding laureates' remarkable works have contributed to the betterment of mankind.
And since joining the event in 2010, I've had the opportunity to meet top-notch scientists and scholars from different parts of the world, widening my horizons.
Every year, we invite outstanding scientists and academics to attend the ceremony. This year, besides the students and academics from 8 universities and 3 tertiary institutes in Hong Kong, we are also pleased to welcome senior representatives from colleges in mainland China. This is a good opportunity to bring together the world's distinguished scientists and broaden knowledge and interest in scientific research.
Also, during the period of stay in Hong Kong, the Shaw laureates will visit local universities and to give lectures on their studies and research. Local students can grasp this golden opportunity to exchange views with the world's most eminent scientists.
These lectures will be videotaped and uploaded onto the Shaw Prize official website to enable academics all over the world to study and appreciate the research findings and valuable experience of the Shaw laureates. The website has become an international platform for exchange of scientific knowledge.
In the past, many of the Shaw laureates have dedicated the monetary award to scientific research, seeking further breakthroughs in their respective studies. Some share the award amongst team members as an encouragement to fellow scientists, or allocate it to training, helping nurture new talents for further scientific advancement.
Recognized as the Nobel Prize of the East, the Shaw Prize is one of the most representative international awards of its kind. Before the commencement of the award presentation ceremony, let us once again give a brief introduction of the Shaw Prize.
The Shaw Prize was established in November 2002 under the auspices of Mr. Run Run Shaw. The purpose of the Shaw Prize is to honor individuals who are currently active in their respective fields and who have recently achieved distinguished and significant advances, who have made outstanding contributions in academic and scientific research or applications, or who, in other domains, have achieved excellence. The award is dedicated to furthering societal progress, enhancing quality of life, and enriching humanity's spiritual civilization.
The Shaw Prize consists of 3 categories, namely the Shaw Prize in Astronomy, the Shaw Prize in Life Science and Medicine, as well as the Shaw Prize in Mathematical Sciences. This is an annual award. The first presentation ceremony was held in 2004. Over the past 9 years, 48 scientists have been honored.
This year, 6 Shaw laureates have been awarded the prize. Nomination and judging commenced in September last year. The results of the Shaw Prize 2013 were announced at the press conference held on the 28th of May this year. The 6 Shaw laureates are here to receive the honor tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise to welcome our officiating guest, the Honorable C.Y. Leung, Chief Executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China, accompanied by Mrs. Regina Leung. Mr. and Mrs. Leung, please.
We now invite the 6 Shaw laureates to enter the presentation hall. This year, we have 2 Shaw laureates in astronomy. Firstly, Professor Stephen A. Balbus, please.
Now, Professor John F. Hawley, please.
We now welcome the Shaw Laureates in Life Science and Medicine 2013. This year, we have 3 Shaw laureates. Firstly, Professor Jeffrey C. Hall, please.
And now, Professor Michael Rosbach, please.
And also, Professor Michael W. Young, please.
And now, we welcome the Shaw Laureate in Mathematical Sciences 2013, Professor David L. Donahoe, please.
May we invite the chairman of the Board of Adjudicators, Professor Channing Yang, to deliver a speech.
Mr. Chief Executive, the laureates, ladies and gentlemen. It was in this hall in September 2004 that the first Shaw Prize ceremony took place. Tonight, at this Shaw Prize ceremony, it is perhaps not inappropriate to remind ourselves of the reasons why the Shaw Prize was established at the beginning of the 21st century. A century ago, in 1901, the Nobel Prize was launched in Stockholm with Röntgen as the first physics Nobel laureate. Röntgen's discovery of X-rays was, as we all know, very, very important for mankind. But in retrospect, its importance was dwarfed by other later discoveries that have saved even more human lives. In 1923, there was the discovery of insulin as the cure for diabetes, the disease more feared at that time than cancer is today. In 1945, there was the discovery of penicillin, the miracle drug, which together with its derivatives has saved more human lives than any other medicine known to mankind. Indeed, discoveries in physical and biological sciences in the 20th century have brought about unprecedented advances in human productivity, health, and welfare, as well as its intellectual horizon, thereby fundamentally changing the fate of mankind on Earth. About science, Robert Oppenheimer has made the famous statement that scientific knowledge is useful. Acquisition of scientific knowledge is ennobling. But unfortunately, scientific knowledge also brought about unprecedented new problems for the 21st century, which include explosive growth of mankind, shortage of resources, worsening environmental problems, and threat of epidemics, and of nuclear war, etc. It is obvious that these difficult problems can only be solved by new advances in scientific research. It was to promote and foster such advances in scientific research that Sir Run decided to establish the Shaw Prize at the turn of the century. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yang, and please take your seat.
We now invite the chairman of the selection committee for the Shaw Prize in Astronomy, Professor Peter Goldright, to deliver a speech.
Good evening. The Shaw Prize in Astronomy for 2013 is awarded in equal parts to Stephen Balbus and John Hawley for their discovery and characterization of the magneto-rotational instability, which leads to turbulence and the outward transport of angular momentum in accretion disks. The attractive force of gravity is responsible for the formation of bound structures over a wide range of scales, from planets to clusters of galaxies. Unbalanced, gravity would cause matter to collapse into black holes. Fortunately, the concentration of mass by gravity is impeded, at least temporarily, by the requirement that the contracting material rid itself of excess energy and angular momentum. Bulk kinetic energy can be converted into heat and radiated away, but angular momentum is less readily disposed of. Consequently, contracting material often assumes the form of a rotating disk. Familiar examples include Saturn's rings and spiral galaxies. Nascent stars grow by accreting mass from disks that live several million years. The coplanar orbits of the solar system planets and of multi-planet systems around other stars are vestiges of these disks. More exotic accretion disks are found around compact objects such as white dwarfs, neutron stars, and black holes. These systems shine by radiating gravitational potential energy released as mass spirals inward. For fluid to spiral in, its angular momentum must be transported out. But how this happens was for long a mystery. In 1991, Balbus and Hawley announced an elegant solution. They demonstrated that even a weak seed magnetic field is sufficient to unleash a powerful instability, the magneto-rotational instability. This instability both creates and sustains turbulence while also amplifying the magnetic field. The beauty and simplicity of the MRI, magneto-rotational instability, is neatly captured graphically. Data for the plots shown on the screen were obtained by solving Newton's equations of motion for two identical particles revolving counterclockwise around a spherical central mass. In the upper sequence, the particles move independently on circular coplanar orbits. As discovered by Kepler and later explained by Newton, the orbital period increases as radius raised to the 3/2 power. This accounts for the growing lead in longitude of the inner green particle with respect to the outer red one. The separation of the particles increases by about a factor of 5 in a single orbit period. In the lower sequence, the particles are connected by an elastic tether whose tension increases in proportion to its length. Although the particles start out on circular orbits, deviations soon become apparent. By the end of the sequence, both their separation and the tension in the tether have increased more than tenfold. Comparison of the upper and lower sequences reveals a remarkable fact. Two particles separate more rapidly when gently pulled towards each other by the tether than they do when moving independently. This is a consequence of the seemingly obstinate behavior of an orbiting body. Gently pulled forward, it moves onto a larger orbit where it orbits more slowly. The tether transfers angular momentum and energy from the inner to the outer particle. The total angular momentum carried by the two particles remains unchanged. However, their total energy decreases with the deficit stored as elastic energy in the tether. It is important that the behavior of the particles linked by the tether is an instability. The rate at which the inner particle spirals inward and the outer outward is proportional to the tether's tension. Moreover, the rate at which the tension increases depends upon the rate at which the particles separate. No matter how small the initial tension is set, both the separation of the particles and the magnitude of the tension grow exponentially. Okay, I have one last comment. The tether is a stand-in for magnetic fields, but 5 minutes is not adequate time to explain that. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gourang. Please take your seat.
We now invite the chairman of the selection committee for the Shaw Prize in Life Science and Medicine, Professor Yudwai Khan, to deliver a speech.
Mr. Chief Secretary, ladies and gentlemen, circadian rhythm, the biologic phenomenon of the 24-hour day-night cycle, has been observed since centuries ago. It is present in plants, animals, fungus, and some bacteria. In our daily life, we all experience circadian rhythm. The genetic control was not understood until 1971, when the late Seymour Benzer and his student Ron Konopka isolated fruit flies that had mutation that lengthened, shortened, or abolished the circadian rhythm, a gene which they refer to as period or pearl for short. However, the mechanism of how circadian rhythm works remained obscure for almost 2 decades, until the groundbreaking contribution made by Jeffrey Hall, Michael Rosbach, and Michael Young, whom we are honoring this evening. Jeffrey Hall was a geneticist using fruit fly as a model. He collaborated with his colleague at Brandeis University, Michael Rosbach, a molecular biologist, and in 1984, together they cloned the gene pearl that was inferred to by Benzer and Konopka. Independently, Michael Young, who was inspired by a Seymour Benzer lecture he heard while a postdoctoral student at Stanford University cloned the same gene at the Rockefeller University. Hall and Rosbach found that the protein made by pearl oscillates at low or high levels according to day or night. Young and his group discovered a key second component of the circadian clock called timeless, or TIM, which oscillate with pearl. Since then, they, followed by other researchers, discover other genes that are important for circadian clock and how their proteins interact with one another to control the circadian rhythm. Subsequently, the mouse form of circadian clock was cloned by Joseph Takahashi at Northwestern University, unraveling the mechanism in mammals. Many of these mammalian genes, including those in humans, have homologs in the fly, underscoring the importance of the original discovery by the laureates. The pioneering work of Hall, Rosbach, and Young opens up a large number of studies that play a crucial role in our understanding of this important biologic function. Not unexpectedly, mutations in genes that affect sleep in humans, though rare, have now been found. Approaches to modify our sleeping pattern are being investigated from their work.
Thank you, Professor Khan, and kindly take your seat.
We now invite the member of the selection committee for the Shaw Prize in Mathematical Sciences, Professor Tony Chen, to address the audience. Professor Tony Chen, please.
Chief Executive, laureates, ladies and gentlemen. Professor Peter Sarnak, who is the chair of the Mathematical Sciences Selection Committee, cannot be physically here today. So he has hence asked me, as a member of the selection committee, to present this short introduction to the awardee of the Shaw Prize in the Mathematical Sciences 2013, Professor David L. Donahoe. As has been the case in recent years, there were many superbly qualified candidates to choose from. Even so, from early on in our deliberations and consultations with experts, it became clear that David Donahoe stood out among our stellar list. One leading expert described him as being the most influential theoretical statistician of his generation, as well as of the generation before and after him. Similar opinions were expressed by all the experts that we consulted. David has introduced novel mathematical tools and ideas that have shaped both the theoretical and applied sides of modern statistics. A strong theme in his work is the development of fast computational algorithms coupled with rigorous mathematical analysis for a wide range of statistical and engineering problems. An example is a very efficient soft thresholding algorithm for function estimation in wavelet basis, which works in the presence of noise and is used widely in applications. David's insight into sparsity of representation in high-dimensional space have played a major role in the development of the many algorithms that are used from statistics to engineering problems, such as ones connected with data compression. His introduction of optimization using the L1 norm, which is a mathematically precise way of describing the error in the compression. Using that norm as a convexification of the problematic L0 norm on functions has been decisive in many of the algorithms that realize striking and unexpectedly efficient sparsification. These ideas are the basis for his and others' work on compressed sensing, in which the algorithm compresses while sensing. This has become a thriving field with applications ranging from compression of images to MRI scans. These are just a few of David Donahoe's many far-reaching contributions to the mathematical sciences. His insights and innovations have inspired many works by others and will continue to do so for years to come. It is a pleasure to congratulate David Donahoe from all of the 2013 selection committee on being a very deserved winner of the 2013 Shaw Prize in the Mathematical Sciences. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chen, and please take your seat. We will now proceed to the Shaw Prize Award Presentation Ceremony 2013.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're much honored to have the Honorable C.Y. Leung, Chief Executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China, to officiate at the presentation ceremony.
Mr. Leung, please.
First, we will present the Shaw Prize in Astronomy 2013. This year, the award is shared by two recipients. The first half goes to Professor Stephen Balbus.
Professor Stephen Balbus, who is currently Civilian Professor of Astronomy, University of Oxford, UK.
John and I were interested in the case of a black hole. How does the material in an accretion disk actually stop orbiting around the central object and fall in or spiral into the center so that the mass can build up?
And the second half goes to Professor John Hawley, also the recipient of the Shaw Prize in Astronomy 2013.
Professor John Hawley, who is currently VITA Professor of Astronomy and Associate Dean for the Sciences, University of Virginia, USA.
When I ran it at relatively high resolution and with the right wavelength, then the image popped up on the screen like mushroom caps that are characteristic of instabilities. And that was another sort of wow moment. The instability was sort of made real at that point.
May we invite Professor Stephen Barbers to deliver his acceptance speech.
Mr. Chief Executive, Lady Shaw, members of the Shaw family, Professor Peter Goldreich, and members of the Shaw Prize Selection Committee, and to all others who have come to take part in this joyous occasion, I am delighted to accept my share of the 2013 Shaw Prize in Astronomy. Previous winners of this prestigious award include many great scientists and many great achievements. To see one's name added to such a list is a deep honor, and I therefore consider myself truly fortunate. I am deeply grateful to my parents, my wife, my family, my principal collaborator and good friend, John Hawley, and to many other colleagues who have made this evening possible. Astronomy is the mother lode of modern science and much of mathematics. It was the first discipline to show that nature's bewildering complexity is comprehensible by the human intellect, that our world can be understood on the basis of simple principles, that complexity is often only apparent. Viewed from the proper reference frame or mental perspective, not only is nature simple, she's beautiful as well. We are moved intellectually by great science and mathematics, but also emotionally. It touches something deep down. I'd like to believe that the work for which John and I are being recognized tonight has some of this character. It addresses a very small part of the grand puzzle of how the universe makes coherent structures from vast, swirling expanses of gas. Use a conventional approach and the problem seems deeply mysterious. Shift the perspective by adding what seems at first to be an unnecessary nuisance, magnetism, and the solution drops out. Perhaps a little too simply, some young researchers encountering the subject for the first time in their courses can't understand why there was ever a problem in the first place. So tonight, we gather to pay tribute to excellence in science and mathematics. However, not everyone shares this enthusiasm. Many of these people hold influential positions. Rational discussion is generally of little use here. But the Shaw family and others have shown us what to do. Recognize scientific excellence in all its manifestations and disseminate, especially to the young, the power and elegance of the scientific method. In my lifetime, we have learned how to manipulate genes, turned once lethal cancers into treatable diseases, elucidated black holes, deduced the age of the universe to 3 significant figures, solved what many thought would be permanently unsolvable mathematical problems, and rendered their solutions. We think, we pool our talents, we can take stuff out of the ground, out of plants, turn it into pieces of chalk that save lives by the millions, or into machines that take people to the moon, or do 10 to the 16 calculations every second. What other sphere of human activity comes remotely close to such accomplishments? This is our most powerful argument and must be the message grasped by the best and brightest of the generations to come. Thank you all, and enjoy this wonderful evening.
Thank you, Professor Barbers.
We now invite also the Shaw Laureate in Astronomy 2013, Professor John Hawley, to deliver his acceptance speech.
Distinguished guests, members of the Shaw Prize Committee, Mr. Chief Executive, I'm deeply honored to receive this significant recognition for the work that Steve and I have done to advance the theory of accretion. I would like to thank Lady Shaw, members of the Shaw Prize Foundation, the Chief Executive of Hong Kong, Professor Yang and members of the Board of Adjudicators, Professor Goldreich and members of the Astronomy Selection Committee. I would also like to thank the staff of the Shaw Prize Secretariat for their hospitality, help, and work in creating this magnificent event. I would also like to express my thanks to my parents, my family members for their support and encouragement throughout the years, and also my wife, Catherine. Of course, I wish to express my gratitude and thanks for the opportunity I've had to collaborate with my colleague Steve Balbus on this work. I would like to say that I am sincerely glad that I was invited to see him receive this award this evening. I wish also to acknowledge those colleagues in the astronomy department at the University of Virginia who provided such a collegial and supportive work environment for us when we did this research. Humanity's understanding of the cosmos is one of the most amazing and profound accomplishments of the human mind. This is especially true when one considers that throughout most of human history, the practitioners of astronomy have had to content themselves only with looking at the light that comes down to us here in this tiny corner of the universe. Direct experimentation was not possible. We could only observe what was offered. In recent years, however, it has become possible through humanity's increasing understanding of physics and through the use of increasingly powerful computers to experiment, to model astrophysical phenomena such as colliding black holes, supernovae, and the universe itself. In our case, it was the behavior of gas as it orbited around a black hole at close to the speed of light. I was fortunate to participate in the rise of computational astrophysics, and I wish to thank one of the pioneers in numerical relativity, my PhD advisor, Larry Smarr, who started me on this research. Larry's tireless advocacy of computational science helped launch the United States National Science Foundation's national supercomputer facilities. Those resources have enabled tremendous advances in many fields. My own research was one small beneficiary. I believe we have only begun to witness what computational science will enable. Through increasingly complex simulation and modeling, as well as the tremendous advances in data acquisition and analysis, humanity stands at the brink of attaining answers to heretofore unanswerable questions, both on Earth and in the heavens. These new times will be most exciting as we make use of these tools and methodologies to better grasp the law of nature and make use of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hawley. Now comes the Shaw Prize in Life Science and Medicine 2013. This year, the award is shared equally by 3 recipients. The first share goes to Professor Jeffrey Hall.
Professor Jeffrey Hall, who is currently Professor Emeritus of Biology, Brandeis University, USA.
It had been shown from earlier fruit fly work that is the daily cycles are not driven by light-dark cycle in the environment. These rhythms persist in constant environmental conditions, as if there's an internal daily clock.
Also, the recipient of the Shaw Prize in Life Science and Medicine 2013 is Professor Michael Rosbash.
Professor Michael Rosbash, who is currently Peter Gruber Professor of Neuroscience and HHMI Investigator, Brandeis University, USA.
The implication of a shared mechanism and shared proteins between flies and humans is that this system already existed 550 million years ago in the last common ancestor of flies and humans.
And also the recipient of the Shaw Prize in Life Science and Medicine 2013 is Professor Michael Young.
Professor Michael Young, who is currently Richard and Jean Fisher Professor, the Rockefeller University, USA.
We found a second gene. We named it Timeless. It turns out that these 2 proteins have to work together in order for biological rhythms, biological cycles to occur.
now invite Professor Jeffrey Hall to deliver his acceptance speech.
So, I start by expressing my deep gratitude for this award. No kidding. I, and of course, all the other 5 persons are deeply grateful for this recognition. What I'll say in the next small number of minutes will have to do with expression of additional kinds of gratitude, which are perhaps a little more subtle or esoteric. This harks back to a time when I was a college student at a tiny so-called men's college in the United States, actually a boys' college, and with absolutely no anticipation, and this is just part of the great good fortune with which I was graced, starting then and in upcoming years, that I became exposed to research in Drosophila genetics by a person who worked for that college, and as I learned later, was the only legitimate researcher anywhere at this little liberal arts college. This guy was a genuine mentor, in addition to being a trainer. Around the same time, I was exposed in a contemporaneous manner by somebody else. I learned about the existence of daily biological rhythms that are manifested by the fruit fly Drosophila. And it was Drosophila genetics at a very, very low fledgling level that I was being exposed to by the mentor to whom I alluded. That fellow realized, he registered that I seemed to like genetics, and possibly I was understanding elements of fruit fly genetics, which even then, long ago, could be quite complicated. But in any case, he encouraged me to go on in biology and to try to get into graduate school for real training in a department that was actually named genetics-wise, that is uppercase G. So I did do. And more good luck, I was extraordinarily fortunate to be vigorously mentored yet again by my immediate supervisor, who, like the earlier guy from college, was always optimistic and enthusiastic, and it was really much more than just day-to-day, semi-grubby training type of experience. In addition, in this department, a remarkable department, I thought, the person who had founded it and long chaired that genetics department was a nudge, also a mensch. Professor Rosbash can decode those terms if you ask him later. This guy, this chairman, knew what was going on in all the laboratories in the department. He knew what every single graduate student was doing. And one day, he hauled me aside, as it were, and said, "You should go do a postdoc with Benzer." Okay. So I did do. 2 days later, it was all set up. And when I arrived in that lab, I realized in about 15 minutes that it was going to be enjoyable intellectually and even sensually to work on Drosophila behavior and fruit fly neurobiology, both from a genetic perspective. There was nothing doable molecular back then. Professor Benzer, the well-known Professor Benzer, who's been mentioned from this podium, it's not a podium, obviously, this evening, Professor Benzer was not much of a mentor because he explicitly encouraged his lab mates to find their own way, even to dabble in various kinds of behavior, not worrying about productivity. And so, for a couple of years of time, I hoped, learning a fair amount as to how to do things, what potentially to do later. And then the chairman, the aforementioned chairman from a few years before, single-handedly got me a job at this place you've heard from this stage, Brandeis University, near Boston. He catalyzed the whole thing, where the first and only job offer I ever got was at Brandeis, thanks to that chairman and mentor. And so I went. More good luck. Right around the same time, who arrives? Somebody I never heard of, nor he me, Michael Rosbash. And because we couldn't help register that we were simpatico with regard to various features of human behavior, often involving misbehavior, and interest in various other non-vocational matters, it seemed as if it was not going to be weird if we might end up actually working together on something. We didn't know whether that would happen or what it would be, but sure enough, a few years later, we began to work together on the genetics and molecular biology of daily rhythms in Drosophila. And this matter of a certain meaningful degree of personal connectivity, I don't know if it was dispositive, but it was influential, because it really made the work, whether or not we were getting anything done during a given year's time, it made the work within a given week enjoyable to do. As people used to say a few decades ago, at least in the United States, it was funky. Okay. Shortly, a few years later, something else happened that I am very grateful for, which is that Professor Young, Mike Young, established, with regard to Rosbash and me, a certain degree of connectivity, scientific and even personal. And this then became a much more salutary situation than had been extant during the early days of what one could call chronogenetic studies of Drosophila, or molecular chronobiology, for us three, vis-a-vis the two institutions in the northeastern United States, for we three to be communicating with total openness, actually ended up, it didn't have to, but it ended up making the work, making the enterprise proceed better. And it was just simply more enjoyable to get to know not only Michael, but Mike as well. And we realized, perhaps to our surprise or shock, that elements of our shared interests extended well beyond vocational alone. So I thank all of these people, including those early mentors with which I was extraordinarily lucky to be graced. And I thank the more recent people with whom I've interacted for good or ill. And then finally, I want to thank what some of us who've worked on this invertebrate often say about it. I want to thank the little flies. They are fascinating little buggers, especially with regard to their behavior, including their rhythmic behavior. And they have provided this spectacular array of genetic factors that can be brought to bear to study almost every imaginable biological phenomenon, except perhaps photosynthesis, but just about everything else, which happens and encompassed within this broad array, this massive monumental enterprise, are daily rhythms. And the little flies really helped promote the understanding of this very widespread process, which is essentially ubiquitous here on the third rock from the sun. So, thanks.
Thank you, Professor Hall.
We now invite the Shaw Laureate in Life Science and Medicine 2013, Professor Michael Rosbash.
I'd like to begin by thanking the Shaw Prize Foundation, Mr. and Mrs. Shaw, and the Shaw Prize Selection Committee for this remarkable honor, and also add the entire organization who have treated us so well during our time in Hong Kong. It is truly humbling to join the fantastic list of former Shaw winners. The Shaw Prize is a coming of age for the field of circadian rhythms. This was an orphan field for a long time. We were neither fish nor fowl, neither molecular biology, genetics, nor neuroscience. Although circadian rhythm work is still spread out over many different areas of investigation, it is now a robust enterprise that can stand alone without help. Many circadian researchers from all corners of the globe and working in many different systems have contributed to building this substantial edifice. I'm also delighted, of course, to share this prize with my colleague, Jeff Hall, and also Mike Young. The three of us owe an enormous debt of gratitude to the pioneering genetic screen of Konopka and Benzer, as well as the broader behavioral genetics enterprise that Benzer founded, as Professor Kahn alluded to. We truly stand on the shoulders of giants. Although science is based on a foundation of hard work, persistence, curiosity, and doubt, I want to speak today for a few moments about luck or good fortune. And first, in a rather unusual way. Jeff, Mike, and I are all in our 60s. We were raised in the US and entered school during a remarkable post-war era when economic and even academic expansion made many features of life much easier than they are for young people today in our country, indeed all over the globe. No one worried about finding a job, nor did I know anyone who thought about making money. The only serious task was to find one's star, one's calling. The world is your oyster, I was told on more than one occasion, and indeed it has been. This remarkable era of biology and medicine, as well as the explosion of support for science, has given me more than a 40-year research career. I was a graduate student not long after Watson, Crick, and Brenner and other pioneers altered forever the worlds of genetics and gene expression. I was then beginning my independent career when recombinant DNA further changed the research landscape and opened up possibilities that only a few visionaries imagined. It soon became routine to clone and sequence individual DNA molecules. This technological advance enabled the first step in my circadian journey, namely the cloning of the period gene, and then almost all the subsequent steps I and my colleagues have taken. The confluence of this remarkable technology with behavioral genetics was a stroke of good fortune that cannot be overemphasized. Good luck was central to my success in many other ways. Although I accepted a job at Brandeis without thinking about future research directions, I encountered genetics and circadian rhythms largely as a result of my friendship with my fellow Shaw Laureate, Jeff Hall. We collaborated for more than 20 years, and much of what I accomplished could not have been done without him. I've been fortunate that many remarkable people have worked in my lab. Without these students, postdocs, research associates, and technicians, I would not be standing here. These people include my wife, Nadja Abovich, who was a key member of my laboratory for more than 20 years. Nadja has been my life partner for almost 30 years, and we have two wonderful daughters. The love of these three women has enriched my life beyond description. Good fortune does not do justice to my circadian journey over the past 30 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Rosbash.
We now also invite the Shaw Laureate in Life Science and Medicine 2013, Professor Michael Young, to deliver his acceptance speech.
I'd like to begin just by expressing my very special thanks to the Shaw Foundation for the incredible support that this foundation has supplied for basic research, for research in the sciences, astronomy, life sciences, and medicine. This is a very rare form of support, and it's truly appreciated. We're also, of course, enormously grateful to have been recognized by the Shaw Prize Foundation for our efforts to understand the genetic underpinnings of daily rhythmic behavior. Jeff Hall, Michael Rosbash, and I began this work exploring the molecular mechanisms of circadian rhythms 30 years ago, and several people along the way supplied essential support involved in my undertaking these studies and keeping me on track. First, I'd like to mention Professor Burke Judd. I met Burke Judd as an undergraduate at the University of Texas. He welcomed me into his laboratory for a brief summer of research that extended into a PhD program. Burke triggered my interest in genetics. He explained the opportunities that the genetics of Drosophila afforded one to explore deep mysteries of biology with great exploratory capabilities. I became Burke's student in the early 1970s, and he encouraged my early interest in 3 mutants that you've heard of before, of the period locus, mutations identified by a graduate student at Caltech, Ron Konopka, working with Seymour Benzer. And it was with Burke's support that I was able to recognize and isolate chromosome rearrangements, chromosome breaks that broke the period gene and ultimately enabled us to isolate that gene and recognize its limits a few years later. In 1975, I went to Stanford to work with Dave Hognes. Dave Hognes had been deeply involved in the molecular biology of bacteriophage years earlier, but had turned his focus to Drosophila and was producing the first libraries of cloned Drosophila DNA. And I can remember Dave's lab was the only lab that I applied to for postdoctoral work. Perhaps naive, but certainly this is the only direction I saw forward at the time. Dave had also invented a technique called chromosome walking, which enabled you to move along segments of contiguous chromosome DNA so that you could surround a gene that was whose biological function could be then identified genetically. And this was a method that I deeply depended on as I took up my own studies at Rockefeller a few years later. Before leaving Stanford, as Professor Kahn mentioned in his introductory remarks, I did hear a lecture. It was a Pauling lecture by Seymour Benzer, where Seymour described his use of mutations in Drosophila as much as a surgeon or a neuroscientist might use a scalpel to look at regions of the brain connected to certain behaviors. These mutations identified genes that somehow coded behavior. And I was taken with that analogy, and I think we'd still be searching for the molecular code for circadian behavior had we not continued with Seymour Benzer's approach in Drosophila. My neighbor at Rockefeller when I arrived was Norton Zender. Norton had been a graduate student with Joshua Lederberg, and in the early 1950s discovered a phenomenon called transduction. He was an extraordinarily eminent scientist, but a very youthful enthusiasm for our work as we began these behavioral genetic studies in the rooms next door. And Norton would come by the lab each day to examine our progress, to watch us as we would cut up chart paper coming off of event recorders showing that, in fact, at the time we'd managed to move a piece of DNA from a normal fly into an arrhythmic fly and repair its behavior. Very similar work was going on, of course, at Brandeis, but I'll never forget Norton's support and enthusiasm in those early days, which continued as we began to identify new genes and the general mechanism behind the clock. Finally, I want to thank my wife, Laurel Eckhart. Laurel and I met when we were undergraduates, but she paid little attention to me at that point. But fortunately, I got a proper introduction from Burke Judd. Laurel was also interested in genetics. She's now a professor of genetics at the City University of New York, and was one of the few who looked at the work I was doing, could understand it, and felt that I was doing something that was possibly promising. So much so that I can remember on many late nights, Laurel would get up to the ring of an alarm clock and join me as I would move into a dark room, pull a vial of Drosophila out, put them under a safe light, and see if they were walking around when they should be sleeping, as we were. So I'd like to thank you once again, Laurel, Norton, Dave Hogness, Burke Judd. You've meant a great deal to me, and I'd like to also thank once again the Shaw Prize Foundation for the tremendous support of the sciences. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Young. And lastly, the Shaw Prize in Mathematical Sciences 2013 goes to Professor David Donahoe.
Professor David Donahoe, who is currently the Professor of Statistics, Stanford University, USA.
I've tried to find the mathematics to explain some of the phenomena. You imagine a sea of zeros with some non-zeros carrying the real information, so to speak. So that would be the simplest way to define a sparse sequence.
We now invite Professor David Donahoe to deliver his acceptance speech.
Thank you to the Chief Executive, Lady Shaw and the Shaw family, the members of the prize selection committees, including Mr. and Mrs. Tony Chen, the Chief Adjudicator and his wife, Chen Ning Yang and Mrs. Yang, and the Shaw Prize staff for their hospitality. And I'd also like to thank Hong Kong University of Science and Technology for hospitality during this visit. I'd like to thank my wife, Mickey, and son, Daniel, for years of very patient support. And I'd like to thank my mentors, collaborators, and students for pursuing research with zeal and dedication. The Shaw Prize that I'm accepting covers the mathematical sciences rather than simply mathematics. When Sir Run Run Shaw started the business that made his fortune, the distinction between mathematics and mathematical sciences could not have been made. This distinction is evolved over time, and to understand why, just look at how Shaw's business has changed. Shaw created movies on celluloid and physically delivered celluloid to theaters. In fact, it's been said that Run Run refers to the specific physical act of delivery of the film. Today, movies are often made digitally, so there is no physical film. Content is often sent wirelessly to handheld devices, so there's no physical delivery and no theater. We are in a new information era. Every time we download movies or search the web, we benefit from advanced mathematics. Every time we go for medical imaging or prospect for oil, we rely on advanced mathematics. The term mathematical sciences arose with the information era, covering academic fields like computer science, information theory, applied mathematics, and my core field, mathematical statistics. The term scientist is appropriate for researchers in these fields. We conduct experiments to show that our theory really works, or we work with scientists from biology, physics, astronomy, or chemistry to test that our theories solve real scientific problems. I myself really do feel the tug of both mathematics and of science. I hope that this year's Shaw Prize award to the mathematical sciences to a person like me who really does feel that tug will inspire talented people out there who feel the tug of mathematics and science to pursue their careers with real zeal and dedication. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Donahoe.
Once again, congratulations to all the 6 Shaw laureates.
We now invite our officiating guest, the Honorable C.Y. Leung, for a group photo.
Photo of our laureates with our officiating guest, the Honorable C.Y. Leung, will definitely be a great memento of this occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, the Shaw Prize Award Presentation Ceremony 2013 has now come to a successful conclusion.
Scientific development advances rapidly. We look forward to seeing you again next year and to witness more accomplishments of distinguished scientists and scholars. Goodbye, and see you next year.
Thank you, good night, and goodbye.